walk with me a little bit because I'm a little bit confused. I'm certain you might be confused, but we're going to get through this together. There's a new law in Florida where if you violate children under the age of 12, you will no longer be on this earth. And I would think everybody hears that and thinks, okay, good job. We wish it would be any child, but you know what? Step in the right direction. But for some reason, you have people who are a little bit skeptical, and for some reason, they want to say that this bill or law that will take the life away from a sick bastard who violates a child under the age of 12, that will be used to target the transgender community.
I don't think that is as bad as it's going to get in the state of Florida or possibly red states in general for trans people. I think that this is the ultimate goal. Yes, he wants to deter as many gay and trans people from the state of Florida as possible, but those who do not leave at their own free will, well, what's going to happen if you refuse to leave a bathroom? They're already calling the communities trans and gay, they're already calling them groomers. That's the next step. Well, they didn't leave the bathroom because they're obviously going to do something with my child. And if they think that you're a pedophile or a groomer or a sex offender, it's legalized genocide.
Hi. So there have been some interesting bills coming out of Florida this week, such as the multiple proposals that would allow the death penalty for anyone who sexually batters a child under the age of 12, which was approved unanimously, or the vote to allow the death penalty on a split jury. Out of the 27 states that allow the death penalty, Florida is now one of 4 that allows it based on a split jury. Now you might be thinking, people who harm children deserve the worst penalties in the world, and sure, but I want us to think about how we keep having these scares focused around minorities about how we are going to harm the children, we are going to be predators, we are going to be etc. Giving the government the right to murder just means they have to redefine who deserves murder before you are on that list, before we are on that list.
You even have individuals who say that black men or black people should be getting out of Florida. Now, I don't know why, in response to a bill which everybody should be cheering for, you're advocating for people to leave Florida because that sets a dangerous precedent, or how you want to make it seem like people are going to start hunting down transgenders when I believe you would need them to actually be convicted of the crime of violating a child, which also has to be voted upon unanimously in the court process. So I'm not really seeing how this is going to be something to target a bunch of people unless they are violating people's bodies who are under the age of 12.
So this has officially happened. I have double checked. Unfortunately, it has gone into effect. And when I tell you that there are just so many people in that comment section cheering this decision, it proves that you have not done any research into this topic or know people who are victims of child SA. I talked about this back in July, I believe, when they first announced this law being kicked around. I will say this as many times as necessary. This law will not save children. It, in fact, will send them to an early grave. There is a reason why judges do not give out the death penalty and why prosecutors do not seek the death penalty, despite the fact that they could have always done that with cases like this. It's because they understand that making the death penalty essentially the mandatory minimum for cases like this actively makes it harder for victims to come forward. According to RAINN, over 90% of juvenile victims know their perpetrator. So these are people who either have unfettered access or consistent access to their victim. 59% of these perpetrators were acquaintances, so think teachers, maybe a camp counselor, or your youth pastor. And then, of course, disgustingly, over a third being family members, so parents, siblings, maybe a cousin, or the creepy uncle you still let in your house for some reason. Only 7% of juvenile victims are SA'd by strangers. It feels like this law got manifested into someone's head with the thought process of, children who have been SA'd, the majority of them wouldn't know the person who did it, right? I've said it before, but victims of SA, regardless of age, but yeah, especially if they are children, do face threats of bodily harm from their perpetrator, especially if it's a continuous thing that happens to them. They threaten their victims by telling them, if you say anything, I will hurt you or someone close to you, or they'll gaslight their victim, telling them that no one will believe them. But now with a law like this, the threats of bodily harm are now 100 times worse. Because I've looked it up. The minimum in Florida for unaliving someone is about 20 years. So getting 20 years minimum or even a life sentence to prison for unaliving that kid is comparatively a better deal than getting a guaranteed one-way ticket to the chair for SAing that kid. This law basically guarantees that child victims are now going to stay silent longer, and if anyone from the outside figures out what's happening, you would basically need a pile of evidence that leads to that person's immediate arrest. Because if they start to feel the walls closing in around them and they have easy access to their victim, nothing's stopping them from getting rid of the kid. Oh, and we cannot forget how this law will definitely be used in order to target people in the LGBTQ plus community, particularly if they are trans or participate in drag. If you are a trans person, or you're like me, a non-trans person who supports trans rights and supporting trans kids, or you're someone who does drag, well then, you have definitely been called a groomer at some point over the last year online. I've had it happen at least twice on Twitter this year because I said I support trans kids. They will 100% use this law and abuse it in order to target trans people, drag queens, or anybody who supports those communities. And if you are part of the Rainbow Brigade that has been siding with bigots saying things like LGB without the T and Q, yeah, being a pick-me ain't gonna save you. They will come for you next.
This is why I don't like when a bunch of people want to start having conversations, because you do it in a disingenuous manner. You want everybody to understand that the world is either bigoted, transphobic, or racist towards a bunch of people. So you look at anything you could find and you go on this tirade, you go on this think piece. And I was kind of agreeing with the woman just a little bit, but then I kept ringing in my mind that, hey, somebody has to actually be convicted of this. I don't think you could just point at a bunch of people and say, they touched 12-year-olds and lock them in jail and wait for the knife to drop on their head. You're gonna have to need a little bit more evidence for something like that. So I can't imagine a scenario where 10 trans people who just so happen to be black are pointed out and they say, those individuals touched 12-year-olds, and y'all just immediately send them to the chambers. That's not really as barbaric as y'all want me to believe. There's a process to all of this, and it'll be a boring process, but if you're somebody who actually commits the crime, guess what? Fuck you. Good riddance. I don't care if you're straight, black, white, Asian, man, woman, trans, gay, don't matter. If you violate a child, I believe you should be gone. And guess what? Florida's headed in that right direction. And there's also this concept of, all right, well, individuals are going to have to come to an understanding that some of these people who violate children are in their family tree. And guess what? That's some sick ass shit. And I don't understand how motherfuckers can even do something like that to their own blood. But guess what? I would hope there is a structure and a safe space for that child to come clean so that that sick son of a bitch can go and face the wrath of God and the devil and wouldn't have to worry about being gaslit into believing that they did something wrong by ratting out a fucking pervert. I support this bill. I endorse this bill. I wish this was something countrywide because there's a lot of examples nowadays of people, grown adults, some of them in the educational system, putting their hands upon children, and a few of them get pregnant by these children, and I believe they should face the wrath of God. But in the meantime, I would love to know what you think about all this in the comments below. Is it transphobic that this law exists? Are people going to start hunting down black men for some reason? Should the black perverts escape Florida so that they could for some reason go to other countries and do these crimes? I believe everybody should be answering no to that one. I will see you all in the next one. Subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.